All right, I'm Mr. Pike here, and I can't wait to jump into one of my favorite books of all time in fourth grade by The Great Horn Spoon by Sid Fleischman. This is a Newbery Award-winning author, not for this book, a different book, but been teaching fourth grade for many years, and this book is a classic fourth grade book because it talks about the gold rush, which is a fourth grade topic in California. Now, you're probably wondering, what is a horn spoon? Because I was. This is a horn spoon. So it's a spoon made out of a horn. That's right. So cattle horn. And so this is a cool one. You can buy one. They have them for $5, $6 at the store when we go to Sacramento in Coloma. And they may have them in a different gift shop. They're pretty cool. And I'm going to jump into this book. Hopefully I have enough recording time. I'm going to do chapter 1 by The Great Horn Spoon. Here we go. I can't wait. I'm going to jump in over here and start us out. Chapter 1. Follow along in your books. By The Great Horn Spoon. Stowaways. The sailing ship with 2 great side wheels went splashing out of Boston Harbor on a voyage around the Horn to San Francisco. Below decks, in the creaking darkness of her cargo hold, there sat 18 barrels of potatoes. Inside 2 barrels, side by side, there squatted 2 stowaways. It was not once upon a time. It was precisely the 27th day of January in the year of 1849. Gold had been discovered in California some 12 months before, and now, in a rush, the gold rush was on. The good ship, Lady Wilma, overcrowded and heavy in the water with cargo, thrashed her way to the sea. Her paddle wheels churned and her smokestack stained the frozen winter sky like ink. She was bound for the gold fields with 183 passengers, not counting the stowaways. Hundreds of gold seekers had been left at the dock, clamoring for passage. The California fever was sweeping through the cities and towns and villages like a heady wind. Men were buying picks and shovels and trying to get from the East Coast to the West as soon as possible and all at once. On the second day at sea, just after dawn, the lid rose silently off a potato barrel. Cautiously, a man raised his eyes above the rim of the barrel to look about. Slowly, he unfolded his long arms, and then he stood, an elegant gentleman in a black broadcloth coat. He could be the first to admit that being folded up in a barrel with a boiler hat balanced on his knees was not the most comfortable way to travel. And there he is. That's called a boiler hat, those big top hats. Now he brushed off the hat and placed it smartly on his head. He looked at a black umbrella on his arm. He hooked a black umbrella on his arm, for he never traveled without it, and pulled up a pair of spotless white gloves. He felt very nearly frozen solid, but permitted himself a most contented smile, and then he gave up a small tap to the barrel beside him. "All clear, Mr. Jack." "Is that you, Praiseworthy?" came a young, muffled voice from the depth of the barrel. Make sure I'm copying here, still recording. Yep. "Your obedient servant," the man replied, and lifted the lid. And there arose from this barrel a schoolboy of 12. He had been sucking a raw potato to slake his thirst. Did you know that that there's water in a potato?
Yeah.
And that you could actually get water out of a potato? And if you put a straw on it. A patch of hair fell across his forehead in a yellow scribble, and he had never been so cold, hungry, or miserable in his life. On the other hand, he'd never been so happy. He wouldn't have traded places with anyone. His pepper black eyes were considerably brightened with the fever of adventure, and he smelled of potatoes from head to toe. His thin nose, which was smudged, felt like an icicle, but he permitted himself a most contented smile. "We made it, Praiseworthy," he said. "We did indeed, Master Jack." Jack gazed at the dark cargo shapes. Let me make sure this is over here a little bit more. Jack gazed at the dark cargo shapes piled high around them and listened to the scrape of the sea along the wooden hull. He thought of home and Aunt Arabella and the friendly blaze in the big stone fireplace. There was no turning back now. They were on their way to the gold fields. Hungry? Asked Praiseworthy. I could eat, I guess, said Jack, who didn't want to give the impression that he had any complaints. Cold? I've been colder, I guess, said Jack, although he couldn't think of when. I suggest we see what can be done about improving our accommodations, said Praiseworthy, tapping his boiler hat firmly in place. Do you know what accommodations are?
No.
Those are like hotel stay, where you're living. Your stay is called your accommodations, where you're sleeping. Shall we go? Go, Jack replied. Go where? He fully expected to pass the voyage below decks with the cargo. You understand, boys and girls, that Jack and Praiseworthy are stowaways. You know what a stowaway is?
Yeah.
They're sneaking on a ship because they didn't pay. Because they probably were trying to save some money. They're called stowaways. He fully expected to pass the voyage below decks with the cargo. And he had read dire accounts. Put this over here. He had read of dire accounts of treatment handed out to stowaways on the ship at sea. Why, to pay our respects to the captain, said Praiseworthy. The captain? The words very nearly caught in his throat. But he'll put us in chains, or worse. Leave that to me, said Praiseworthy, with an airy lift of an eyebrow. Come along, Master Jack. Jack gathered courage from Praiseworthy's cool assurance. As far back as Jack could remember, he'd never known anything to ruffle Praiseworthy's calm. In his black boiler hat, his black coat, and spotless white gloves, he was easily mistaken for a professional man, a lawyer, perhaps a young doctor, but he was nothing of the sort. Praiseworthy was a butler. And he was a butler by breeding, by training, and by choice. More than once, Jack had heard his Aunt Arabella say that Praiseworthy was the finest English butler in Boston. He'd been with Jack's family since before Jack could remember. It seemed to him that there had always been a Praiseworthy. The ship gave a lurch, and the stowaways gathered up their 2 carpet bags, picked their way through the darkened passage of the hold, and Jack saw barrels of smoked fish bound for San Francisco. There were thousands of feet of lumber and enough bricks to build a hotel. He saw boxes of rifles and 2 brass cannons to fight off the wild Indians, he supposed. And he could make out wet bundles of grape cuttings, enough to plant a vineyard. With his heart thumping, Jack followed Praiseworthy up a ship's ladder to the creaking deck above. And he was sure the captain would put them in chains, at the very least. Now, the whistling of the wind came to them, and the thrashing of a great side wheels seemed as loud as thunder. They found themselves in the crew's quarters, where daylight barely even penetrated. A sailor with a gold ring dancing in his ear was filling a lamp with whale oil. "My good fellow," said Praiseworthy, "can you direct me to the captain?" The sailor looked up with a curious squint and a ring in his ear and did a jig. "The wild bull of the seas?" "Aye, mates." He lifted a wet thumb as a pointer. "Up there. Up there." They went climbing another ladder to another deck. And now Jack was sure the captain would have them walking the plank. At the very least, wild bull of the seas? The Praiseworthy was a match for anyone, and he told himself, tried to keep a straight and firm jaw. They entered the main saloon where the shivering passengers were swarming like bees around 2 pot-belly stoves. Everyone seemed to be talking at once and saying the same thing. "You've been hogging that stove long enough. I got here first." Let me in, partner. Jack saw men of every description, and some who defied description. There were lanky farm boys in rough boots, and dandies in tight pantaloons, and there were Yankees in beaver hats, and Southerners in planters' hats. And there were tradesmen, politicians, Frenchmen and Dutchmen, fat men and thin ones, gentlemen and scoundrels, with not a woman among them. And they were bound for the gold fields, which was no place for a woman and children. Or so they thought. Give me... Oh, wait, let me see. Wrong page. And here's a nice picture for you of everybody. Give me a turn at that stove, gents. Stop pushing, sir. Praiseworthy tapped the nearest gold seeker on the shoulder, and a frock-coated man with a sword cane, and inquired, "Can you direct me to the captain, sir?" The man lifted his sword cane and pointed. Up there, he snapped, and returned to the fray. In due time, after climbing another ladder, the two stowaways found the captain in his cabin, with the door banging open and shut with the roll of the ship. He had just come in from deck, and his wet oilskins lay in a heap, the wild bull of the seas. His legs apart, he stood bent over a long table. He was trying to thaw the ice in his curly black whiskers over a lighted candle. We don't just stand there inviting the weather. Well, don't just stand there inviting the weather, he said in a voice like the roar of a cannon. Come in. And here's where it starts getting good. The butler shut the door, only to have it fly open again. Praiseworthy, at your service, sir. And this young gentleman is Master Jack Flagg of Boston, who seeks his fortune in the gold fields. Bah! The ship's master, whose name was Joshua Swain, hardly bothered to look up. It was hard to tell whether he was a good man in a bad temper or a bad man in a good temper. He had a plump nose and wore a long blue coat with a row of brass buttons the size of gold pieces. The Lady Wilma pitched and rolled, and the candlestick slid from one end of the long table to the other. Captain Swain caught it just in time. Blasted weather, he growled. And me, racing the Sea Raven around the Horn. Me, with my hold full of bricks and twice as many passengers as I ought to carry. But I'll beat the Sea Raven. I'll beat the Sea Raven by grabs. If I have to throw the extra passengers overboard. The door banged shut, and Jack, now wide-eyed, stared at the ship's master as if he were a stout devil in brass buttons and frozen whiskers. He would give them the plank for sure. Again the ship lurched, the candlestick flew, but this time Praiseworthy caught it in midair. Allow me, sir, he said, and held the candle firmly under the captain's stiff whiskers. But the wild bull of the seas wouldn't stand still, and Praiseworthy was soon following him as he paced the cabin. Do you know what the Sea Raven carries in her cargo holds? Captain Swain bellowed. Miner's boots and flannel shirts and mosquito netting. Mosquito netting! Why, she's so light in the water, her keel is hardly even damp. And then he stopped to thaw his beard over the flame, and the roar went out of his voice. Ah, he sighed. And another moment, a smile appeared in the weathered creases of his eyes. That's better then. Now then, gentlemen, what can I do for you? Jack exclaimed a quick glance with Praiseworthy, who remained perfectly at ease. We wish to report a pair of stowaways, sir, the butler said. At that moment, the captain's smile vanished, and he exploded again. Stowaways! He roared. Stowaways, by grabs, I'll skin them alive. I'll put them out in chains. Where are they? In his fury, the captain almost set his whiskers aflame. Praiseworthy pinched out the candle. Standing right here, sir. Here? Where? I'll skin them alive. I'll put them in chains. Stowaways on my ship. Where are they? Here, sir, the butler repeated. And Jack, swallowing hard, decided to make the best and the worst of it. Standing right before you, sir. It was as if for the first time Captain Swain even noticed Jack at all. You? He bellowed, and his plump nose was red with anger. Why, you're a mere jibbable boy, a lad of 10. 12, sir, said Jack. But I could do a man's work, sir. By grabs, I'll make you walk the plank, both of you. And if I may make an observation, said Praiseworthy, you're obviously too civilized for such pirate tricks. Bah. Permit me to explain, Praiseworthy went on. It was not our intention to defraud the shipping company. The moment there was posted notice of the Lady Wilma's departure for California, Master Jack and I were in line. Let's see, is this it? Oh yeah. The moment there was posted notice of the Lady Wilma's departure for California, Master Jack and I were in line to buy a ticket. But the push and clamor, some clever cut purse helped himself to our passage money. A cut purse was a person that would get cut into your wallet or something and kind of steal your money. Cut purse helped himself into our passage. Hold on a second, put this right here. Make sure you can see it all in my video. Kind of hard to see this all. Let me shrink this down a little bit. There we go. Where was I? Hit the plank. Ticket for himself.
No doubt, he bought a ticket.
Yep, right, you need to point at it. Right there.
Oh, right here. Okay. The moment read this, but in the push and clamor, I read that. No doubt he bought a ticket for himself and is aboard the very ship, sir. A likely story, growled the captain. An unlikely story, Praiseworthy said, but it's true. Naturally, we had no choice but to become stowaways. And if I may add, it is imperative, sir, that Master Jack reach the gold fields and make his fortune without delay. Bah! This California fever is spreading like a plague. New England will be left half empty in another 6 months. Almost finished here. A couple more pages. By grabs, anything with a keel is calling itself a gold ship and putting to sea. Scows with rotten bottoms, fishing trawlers, whaling ships, Argonauts of old, they're chasing after the gold fleece. Every man, Jack, thinks he will make his fortune. Blah. All this while Jack Flag stood quietly listening, not only to the captain, but to the icy winds and the shrouds and ratlines. He stood straight and tried not to look afraid. He'd made up his mind that he must reach the treasure streams of California one way or another, and this was certainly one way or another. He refused to give in to the lurking homesickness. But he found himself thinking of his 2 younger sisters, Constance and Sarah, left behind in Boston with Aunt Arabella. They had surely burst into tears to find him gone, run away. Perhaps they had not dried their eyes yet. But there was no help for it, he told himself. Neither Jack nor his sisters remembered their own parents, who'd been taken away by cholera. That was a disease that killed many people back then. The children had gone to live with their Aunt Arabella in the big house on the bay, with almost more rooms than they could count. She was young and beautiful, as the house was old and grand. It had been in the Flag family for more than a century. In times past, the house had been filled with servants and guests and laughter, but the family had fallen upon hard times. Aunt Arabella had closed off half the rooms and no longer entertained. Of her staff, she kept only the upstairs maid, a downstairs maid, and Praiseworthy. And then Jack had overheard Banker Stites tell Aunt Arabella that their inheritance was almost gone. In another year, he warned her, she would be virtually penniless. Even the house with its family memories would have to be sold. I'd advise you to fire your remaining servants at once, Banker Stites said to him. You can't afford them anymore. But I couldn't do that, Aunt Arabella smiled. Why, they're like family members. Oh no, I couldn't let them go. It was then that Jack knew he must help Aunt Arabella. But how? At the same time, stories drifting back from California excited everyone's imagination. He'd heard of men picking up nuggets the size of goose eggs and stubbing their toes on lumps the size of pumpkins. A boy could do that, even a boy not yet 13. Without a second thought, Jack had made plans to run away to the gold fields. But nothing escaped Praiseworthy, and he found Jack out. Instead of informing Aunt Arabella, for she would never consent to such a venture, Praiseworthy kept Jack's secret, and more. An excellent plan, he said. A worthy plan indeed, for he was as devoted to Aunt Arabella as Jack himself. I'll go with you, Master Jack. There will be ship's passage to pay, and I've a few banknotes put aside, and together pooling savings, the boys and the butler set out for the world at large. But thanks to the light-fingered thief, the world had proven to be no larger than the inside of a potato barrel. Blast, said the captain, standing at the porthole. And I'm almost done here. Hang with me. There's the sea raven abeam us now, standing there as if to thumb her nose up at us. Jack got a glimpse of the other ship on the rising swell. A two-masted side-wheeler exactly like the Lady Wilma. If I may observe, Praiseworthy remarked with his perfect calm, if there is a 15,000-mile voyage around Cape Horn to San Francisco, I believe it's not the beginning of the race that counts, sir, but the end. If I win the race, I'll get command of a new clipper ship building in the yards. She'll be the pride of the seas, and I want her, sir. Captain Swain unhooked the brass voice tube and bellowed to the engine room below. More steam, sir! It's all we can do to keep up. More steam! And then he turned to the stowaways. You'll work off your passage on this ship by grabs. You there, boy. Jack, who was already standing straight, stood even straighter. Yes, sir. You'll work as a ship's boy. I'll run your legs off. And that's letting you off easy. And you, sir? Praiseworthy, at your service. What in tarnation are you in that getup? I'm a butler, sir. A butler? The captain roared. A butler? What in the name of Old Scratch can a butler do? It's actually the other way around, sir, Praiseworthy said, who took pride in his calling. There's nothing a butler cannot do. I open doors, I close doors, I announce that dinner's served, I supervise the staff and captain the household, much as you do on this ship, sir. A most exacting job, if I must say so. And of course, the captain says, blah, bah. And Jack ventured, Aunt Arabella says he's the best there is. She says there's no problem too big for Praiseworthy. Silence, boy. A butler, are you? By grabs, I know where there's a door you can open. The furnace door, and you can shovel in fuel. To the coal bunkers with you, butler. Now out of my sight before I change my mind and put you both in chains. Sir, said Jack, trembling inwardly, I don't care to be a ship's boy. What? If Praiseworthy is going to the coal bunkers, I'll shovel coal too. Jack met Praiseworthy's glance, but only for a moment. We're partners, sir. Either send me to the coal bunkers or, he gulped, or put me in chains. The wild bull of the seas was struck absolutely speechless. Don't pay any attention to Master Jack, said Praiseworthy quickly. The boy's light-headed from sheer hunger. He hasn't eaten since yesterday, and he doesn't know what he's saying. Yes, I do, said Jack. You told me yourself we'd stick together through thick and thin. By this time, the captain had recovered his voice, and a smile lurched in his eyes. By grabs, he said. By grabs, now here's a lad with stuffins. He doesn't want an easy berth. Wants a man's job. All right, to the coal bunkers, both of you. Thank you, sir, said Jack, picking up his carpet bag, and the captain cocked his shaggy eyebrow. It wouldn't hurt none if you stopped off first at the galley and told the cook I said to give you something to eat. A man can't shovel coal on an empty stomach, or a lad either. Now, be out of my sight. And the door flew open, and the stowaways withdrew, and they descended one ladder and then another, and got their breakfast and reported to the engineer. He pointed out the boiler furnace, the coal bins, and the shovels. And Praiseworthy removed his boiler hat, his white gloves, and the umbrella from the crook of his arm. They made a neat pile of their coats and rolled up their sleeves. Unless I miss my guess, said Praiseworthy, the wild bull of the seas is a gentleman at heart. I hope he wins the race, Jack said. The stowaways set to work shoveling coal in the...
Mike?
Yes.
Can you send Cameron Steptoe to the office?
Will do.
Thank you.
The stowaways set to work shoveling coal into the yellow flames of the furnace. Flames that made a steam that turned the great side wheels. Jack was eager to work. Besides Praiseworthy, as if it brought them even closer together. Sometimes he wished Praiseworthy were anything but a butler. It imposed a slight distance between them that Praiseworthy was careful to maintain. Jack would be happy to be called Jack, just Jack, and not Master Jack. But Praiseworthy wouldn't hear of it, even though they were now partners. Praiseworthy, said Jack, and I'm almost finished, wiping back the hair from his forehead. He had to raise his voice above the howl of the fire and the clank of the machinery. Praiseworthy, do you really believe the cut purse is aboard the Lady Wilma? I do indeed, said the butler, digging into the bunker coal. And we shall unmask the scoundrel. But how? How? Why, I haven't the faintest idea, Master Jack. But between us, we'll think of something, by grabs. And while the captain went back on deck and froze his whiskers again, and while the passengers huddled around the two potbelly stoves, Praiseworthy whistled and Jack hummed. They alone of the gold seekers aboard the Lady Wilma had a roaring fire to warm them as the side-wheeler went splashing through the sleet and winds of the sea. So that's the end of the first chapter. I know I'm looking here. There's almost 30 minutes recording. I can't believe my phone recorded that much. What do you guys think was Praiseworthy's plan here that he executed perfectly?
Maybe to make friends with the captain.
Okay, make friends with the captain. They did that somewhat. Evan?
They wanted to not pay for the ship.
And they warmed themselves up near the stove, because who do you think is going to be the warmest people?
Shovelers.
Shoveling the coal. All right, till chapter 2.